Hello, folks. Today's conversation feels less like an interview and more of a doorway, a threshold, if you will. My guest is Ariella Daly, a dreamworker, bee tender, and guide of the liminal spaces where body, land, and imagination meet. Her work lives at the crossroads of bees, dreaming, and the oracular, not as separate practices, but as ways of listening to a world that is already talking to us. Many of us were taught to treat dreams as private noise and nature as a backdrop. And what I love about Ariella's work is that she gently unsettles that story. She invites us into a relational way of knowing where the body may carry messages rather than malfunctions, and where purpose is not a single destination, but a living weave of many threads, an ongoing weaving as well, I would suggest. So today we're exploring bees, voice, illness as possible initiation, questioning tradition, and how we build businesses, particularly as females, and what it means to become visible when staying in relationship with mystery. So here we go. I hope you enjoy as much as I did. Oh, Ariella Daly, so beautiful to be with you this evening. Bless you for your time. So
Oh,
lovely to be
thank
with you.
you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for
um,
having me.
oh, it's such a beautiful thing to be with you. I first stumbled on your work in a course that I did with you in 2021 with Dreaming with the Bees. It was such a beautiful course, and it was the right thing for me at just the right time. When people come to your work, perhaps via Instagram or other kind of, other social platforms, the first thing that they might come up upon is the bees. You're working with the bees. But or that's who they might meet first. When though did your work with the bees become less of a kind of tending to them as insects and seeing them more as teachers?
Oh, oh, that's how it started. Yeah, it didn't change. It started that way. But that was so when people come to my work, they see I finally changed my website after so many years because I am multi-passionate, so I have a lot of directions that I go in. So at this point, if we've got the bees and actual tending, keeping bees, and then we've got the dream work, and then I also do other shamanic style oracular work. So it's a lot and it can overwhelm people, but they do interweave, and that's in part because of how the bees came to me and my interests. So I would say, from an academic perspective, I was deeply interested. I went into anthropology because I was deeply interested in the human relationship to the land, to animals, and to the numinous, to the unseen, to spirit. And interestingly, all of these things come together in human relationship with bees. So I started studying that, like what is it about people and bees? And why have people held bees as sacred across time and culture? And that led me to a series of synchronistic events where I ended up with a swarm of bees. I'd never seen a swarm. A swarm, for people who aren't beekeepers, is how bees reproduce as a colony or as a whole in the spring. So a swarm of wild bees found a crevice in the wall, the exterior wall of my house, and they moved in. And they were there when I went through a very personal loss and a physiological experience. I had a miscarriage, and it was surgical because of the nature of it. So I was hospitalized. I came out of it. The bees were in the walls. Um, I was already feeling really connected to them spiritually. And then a week later, another swarm happens. This is a year later now after the first swarm. And I was able to catch that swarm. Catching swarms is what beekeepers have always done to populate hives. That's how they get bees. Now we have this whole like commercial industry around selling bees, but it used to be that you would catch your bees. So I caught these bees out of an apple tree and moved them into a hive of a box that I had built myself. And yeah, the relationship started then. So I started dreaming with them. I started having, it was just, I was always having these very profound emotional experiences with them and being with bees, sitting next to the hive, going into the hive when I needed to, which was not often. Being around them was so profoundly healing. So that, yeah, the answer is always, it's always been that way. Yeah.
That's magical. And I think that's what I love about your work is that we can kind of grow up learning about nature,
Mhm.
but more and more we want teachers who teach us how to have a dialogue with nature. When you speak about dreaming with the bees, what would you say are what are we what's going on there? What are we dreaming with? Are we
Yeah.
dreaming actually with the bees? What is it that we're wanting to work with?
I just invite people to crawl into a bed filled with bees and see what happens. No, it's all
Without
funny,
any
a
protective
bit
gear.
alarming. They are a number of stinging venomous sisters, but they are very sweet, and they typically don't do that unless they're feeling threatened. Although any type of squishing feels like threatened, so you wouldn't want to roll around on some bees. Uh, but yeah, so dreaming with bees is it happened to me, and through that experience, I started working with it more intentionally. But what what happened at first was that I started having dreams that weren't necessarily about the bees, but eventually I started to connect the dots and realized that in my dreams, the bees were communicating to me. They were communicating needs, they were communicating a threat they were dealing with. And I started to really have this relationship of getting messages through dreams. So that's not unusual. People have received messages through dreams throughout time. Often those messages seem to be about their life, or when I think of this from a modern perspective, our life or the people around us. We don't live in an animist earth-based culture anymore, but in an animist earth-based culture, of which there are still many. They're just not the dominant, global culture at the moment, the Western culture that's everywhere. Um, we are so divorced from our relationship to ourselves as nature and nature as a reflection of us. We've learned to name it, we've learned to identify it, but we don't relate to it. But a primary way of relating in an animist culture where everything is inspirited and everything has consciousness and everything can communicate, a primary way is to dialogue through dreams, dialogue through dreams, through visions, through shamanic journeys, through song, and to start to feel and intuit these experiences. And it can be quite literal. So I've had literal dreams about beehives. I've had literal dreams about, or I mean, I've had very metaphoric dreams that have been about the bees. But at its heart, dreaming with bees is about invitation. So it's this invitation, it's this saying inside yourself and perhaps even out loud that I can connect and I desire to connect with something that goes beyond me, that isn't even human. And what does that look like, and what does it feel like when I invite the bees to bring dreams to I think of it as bringing dreams or sharing dreams, inviting that consciousness into your dream field, into your dreaming experience. What's important about that invitation is that you're now stepping into intentional dreaming. So the intent carries so much. We can intend to experience healing, we can intend to experience to ask for insight. But with dreaming with bees, when the intention is to invite them in, you're inviting in this collective consciousness, because bees are a super organism. So they exist as a whole. You have thousands of sisters, a mother, and some brothers existing as one organism made up of many individuals. It's called biologically, it's called social living or social organism or a eusocial organism. And these that quality of many voices working together as one is something that I think humans are very, very keen to reconnect with. It's not that we
Mm.
haven't been that, and it's not that we aren't that, but again, we've been divorced from that and we've been cut off from that. So often, as we start to try to find our way back into relating with the more than human world, it can feel clunky and achy and um, like there's so much longing there, and there's this sense of loneliness that we touch. It can be very tender and also quite magical and mystical because it does start to show up this like, oh, my dreams are a little different, or wow, interesting, now my dreams seem to be more colorful, or oh, my dreams seem to have a lot more people in them, or there's a lot of things that I've noticed over the years when people seek to dream with this collective hive consciousness. So that's
Mm.
really what it is. You could choose to dream with a mountain. You could choose to dream with the stars, and the tone of the dream might change. But bees have been seen throughout time as messengers between the worlds. So between our world and the world of the gods, or our world and the world of paradise, or the other world, or the world of spirit, or the world of fairies, it's all like they have been associated with the other for a long time. So it's in our collective ancestral DNA to approach them as these beings that can help bring messages and bring dreams.
Mm. Oh God, there's so much in there. I have about a gazillion questions. In in one of your newsletters, you speak. I'm gonna try and find the.
Yeah, take your time.
You said about one of your core callings is to find the vestiges of earth-based spirituality in your ancestral lands and beyond, and to look where women held roles of spiritual authority, um, to kind of really understand the roots of pre-Christian culture and women's spirituality, and how often that then can get confused and with the kind of Christianized versions that we see today. It's all kind of muddled, we might say. Um, and that really, I even feel really moved when I consider that in how sometimes how far we've been removed from our authority as women, as kind of with earth-based spirituality. And in one of those, I'm kind of jumping a little from one place to another here, but you spoke there about doorways and thresholds, and how in the Western world and in modern life we've often come to see illness as, we very much pathologize illness rather than seeing it as perhaps a portal,
Yeah.
as a kind of a teacher. And when I first came to your work, what fascinated me and still fascinates me is that I was diagnosed in my late teens with an illness called narcolepsy, which of course
Mhm.
is all about dreaming and slipping into the unconscious all day, every day, hypnagogic dreaming, all of that. I would just really love to know if we lived in a society that honored liminal states. We saw this kind of sleeping disorders, um,
Mhm.
trans states differently. What kind of what would we be learning there, do you think?
I can I can only imagine and glean the answer to that, but and I think it's worth actually looking at some of the studies around modern day, what we might call animistic or shamanic cultures. So earth-based cultures, cultures that have a direct relationship with um, altered states or non-ordinary states of consciousness. So when we look at, what comes to mind is this story that you see often about in different cultures about the mark of someone who is meant to be I'm thinking of all the different words at the moment because shaman is such a it's just such a specific term to the Tungus people of Siberia and that region. that's been appropriated and used across the world at this point by white anthropologists. So, there's but medicine people, people who are doing both physical healing through herbcraft and that sort of thing, but also bringing messages, seers, visionaries. I think of in my lineage, Celtic lineage, that would have been the poet seers, the Minfasa, various types of people who could, or, oracles, if we look to ancient Greece, the dream doctors of ancient Greece. There's all of these different ways that people have honored visionaries, and I do not mean visionary in like the like bro tech way. I mean
Yeah.
like visionary and like literal visions and insights about the future or the current state of the collective, the clan, the tribe, the people. So when we look at historically and presently markers that often show up for those people, is going to be a childhood illness. It's going to be a injury that changes their ability to be like everyone else. Now they might have like a permanent injury at a young age, like somewhere between birth and maybe mid-20s, you could say. Something that shifts. Not that that shift can't happen later, but when we're looking at it in sort of a historical context. So when we think about something like illness or narcolepsy, we can, someone might see you as a dreamer. Who's Amanda Scott talks about. She has a book called Boudica, and it talks a lot. It's a fiction, but it's a lot about the people who are chosen as dreamers in this Celtic culture. And this, I think is it Boudica? Is it Ireland? I think. Oh, yes, yes. And so you could have been chosen as that. And then what would have happened, possibly, again, I can only guess, is that you would have been not just honored in that, but held in that and then raised within that. So your gift would have been cultivated, but not to your detriment. Yeah.
Mm.
And then we also have like you'll see it again and again, but a lot of the most powerful healers out there have gone through some kind of major life crisis, whether that's a illness or an injury or a trauma. And that, not that other people don't have traumas, but it's very common. Uh,
Mm.
you know, I I didn't get to sidestep that one. I had to go through it too. So
Mm.
yeah.
How can we bring healing and dreaming together?
Mm, yeah. Well, um, again, I'm going to reference this idea of an earth-based culture that would see healing as holing. So when we are ill or when we have an illness or a trauma, there's a lot of references, or we could say there's this quality of fracturing, and we hear about it in psychology as well, dissociation. So we haven't, modern names for it, but the idea that some part of myself got
Mm.
stuck behind, got left behind, or got fractured, and that we're calling pieces of ourselves home. We're always seeking to whole ourselves, to shift the energy, to bring greater flow to parts of the body and the spirit. And dreaming can be a liminal landscape where that can take place. And I truly know this to be a real thing. I have experienced it, I have witnessed it in others. It can range from direct healing. So this is where we have to really move into an idea that one can experience an energetic change of essence in dreams or in an energy session or in a journey, visionary journey type experience. I don't have a lot of experience with mind altering substances and plant medicine, but I know that that is the case with many people who have gone down that road, such as with ayahuasca or something like that. There can be truly like a true and permanent change. Dreams can also bring up the excavation process that needs to happen. They'll
Mm.
show you the thing. So that's where like healing and nightmares sometimes go hand in hand. The nightmare is exposing something that's ready to be flushed up and out into the surface. Healing can also look like a series of dreaming yourself whole, a series of dreams that show up over time to show you the the path you're on or lay the path out before it actually happens in real life. Then we have things like, again, coming back to direct healings and dreams, it can look like anything from people. I teach so many dream classes, I see this a lot. So it can be sometimes a visitation by a being or a person showing up who you know, but they have a different energy and something happens between the two of you. It can be being stung by a bee. It could be being bit by a snake. It could be being chased by a bear. Sometimes the animals show up to show us this infusion of that power and that medicine into your life. Venom is healing, so it's specifically bee venom. So anytime people get stung in dreams, I always know, oh, there's a healing coming through here for them. Um, People have absolutely reclaimed lost parts of their childhood in dreams. It's pretty profound what can happen in a healing in the dream space. But it also helps to be aware of it and look at it through that
Mm.
lens. Yeah.
And so it's helpful that we're not then seeing nightmares or bad dreams as kind of good or bad, but we can, I guess it can help us just to get curious what's going on underneath that. Oh, I'm very curious how we don't just immediately jump to oh, it's the X, Y, or Z. So, for example, the other day or the other night, I had a dream that there was a very big whale in a very small lake and it was stuck and it was lonely. And so there's a very obvious, like, are you kind of think mind kind of goes off to a very kind of, oh, so it means I'm this and I'm that kind of a thing. I wonder how we stop ourselves from doing that, from being kind of very literal.
Yes. Well, first, we are multidimensional beings, and therefore so are our dreams. So our dreams are going to have and are allowed to have multiple meanings, and those meanings don't all have to get along with each other. It's kind of that like yes and. So
Mm.
yes, that very little meaning might be there and it might land for you. It might mean something for you. But when we start to explore other pathways of meeting the dream, we might discover more or another layer. So, for instance, there's dream mirroring, which is a process I teach where you work with other people to receive intuitive mirrors and reflections back about your dream. But not all of us have that opportunity or have people to do that with. So then there's activities like what happens if you see the dream in your mind for a little while, feel it, get the texture, the tone, the feeling of it back. The feeling is always really important if you can, the way it makes you feel, the feeling in the dream, and then set a timer for 10 minutes and write from the perspective of the whale. And then set a timer for 10 minutes and write from the perspective of the water. And what comes, like really
Mm.
from an I am perspective.
Mm.
And that can be very profound for people. Other people are somatic based, movement oriented. So they might be the whale and see what happens when they put on a playlist or put on some music and move with the dream and feel what it feels like to be in that space and let your body express that from a movement perspective. Dance-ish because it's movement. It's moving to see what happens. And often in those types of experiences, like let's say you're doing it as a movement experience and you're more drawn to that kind of expression, it might start with a whale, but then you might experience, a vine showing up, coming down into the water that you start crawling out of, and then suddenly something else is going on. And that's all part of the dream layers unfolding because the dream happens in the imaginal realm where we can be touched more readily and easily by spirit, interact with spirits, consciousness, and our imagination is also part of that realm. So when we can bring our imagination on board to help us sort out our dreams. Those are just a couple examples. Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. You wrote a fantastic, there was a newsletter just recently about embracing our multitudes, which is something that's very, very close to my own heart. Kind of not kind of shoving ourselves into a singular box kind of a thing. And you actually spoke in there that you said I often find myself in a curious place where bees, myth, folklore, animism, dreams, and the oracular arts um, all meet. And it's a bit like tending a garden where each plant seems unrelated until you see how their roots intertwine beneath the soil. And I just would love to know if we resist that idea of being kind of multitudinous, is that a word? Multitudinous, multifaceted beings. What do you think we lose psychologically and perhaps spiritually if we're kind of trying to compress ourselves into one identity or one niche, one box?
Mm,
What are we losing there?
I have so many answers to that.
Oh,
I
please do
look
tell.
look at what, you know, just think about eating. That's what I think about if you were only able to have the same meal or set of meals all the time and you couldn't taste, those wonderful spices that you might want to incorporate in the fall or those new green shoots or that freshness of a late summer peach. Like the world is seasonal, the world is multidimensional. Our experience of it on a sensate level through taste and touch and sight and sound and color is multidimensional. What if we only liked one music? We certainly don't. So why would we be that? It's just an impossibility. Not to say that there aren't people who have incredible focus and expertise, but that's not what I'm talking about. Focus and expertise, that sense of that life path is wonderful for some people. It doesn't mean they don't also love other things. That's just where they're focused. But I think because we exalt that, we hold that up as the pinnacle of experience to become such an expert. I mean, like if we could just get experts are wonderful in terms of so many things. We have a lot of soapboxes out there, and I do think there are times where, like, yes, like it helps to go to somebody who's studied something deeply to understand it better because thank God I don't have to do that. Somebody else has done it. I can chat with them instead. But it's led to this spiritual crisis that I see in people that has to do with the words find your purpose. I'm not a big fan of those words. Because unfortunately we've attached purpose to career, job, vocation. It's hard to separate the two. And so I remember when I was teaching with the Shift Network, and they were wonderful. I enjoyed teaching their classes, but they were still coming, that marketing team was still coming from, a capitalistic marketing system. And I get it. That's part of what they had to do, but they wanted to know, like, is this course about finding your purpose? What's their purpose? What is their pain point? What's the pain they're experiencing that they're going to want to
Mm.
take this course? Like, what's their purpose? Does this help find the purpose? They weren't actually like that. I'm way
I know, I know.
exaggerating.
No,
They were lovely.
I
They were
know. I'm
lovely.
laughing because I've done
But
so many courses with that exact narrative.
yeah,
Oh, it's
yeah.
so
And
painful.
like, do you think, like, I don't know. I just think of like the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Like, never once have I learned or heard of a story, creation myth, or a story, yeah, anything, a legend that had to do with somebody finding their purpose. Vision quests, sure. Going on journeys, sure. But that's only one part of their life, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
The word multidimensional, yeah, multifaceted. We need more.
Multi-layered, all the
Yeah.
multis, multi-storied.
Yeah. It's just that, all of us carry so many stories in us, and the diaspora of people woven within so
Yeah.
so many of us through heritage. And just look at, people who do like look at their genes and start to realize, oh my gosh, I have
Mm.
heritage in this place and this place and this place, and all those ancestors are singing through my bones. And yeah, We have a
Oh,
lot of
so could we ask our dreams to help us pull the strands together in how we weave our unique, all the different, to kind of weave all the different unique strands that we have as an individual? Could we go into dream with that?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean that in itself could be an intention. So dreaming intention is about setting a very clear intent for that night or a multiple set of nights dreams. When I think about that, helping me weave my many threads together into a whole, what I'm drawn to is more like, okay, well, what am I not seeing? Or what threads need my attention right now? Because
Mm.
currently I'm deep in the tending of the thread of motherhood. Um, and that thread didn't start until my I went to like I was almost 40. And so that like there are other threads that I had to set down that are still part of me. I'm not out there as a touring musician right now, but does that make me less of a musician? Just not out there doing that anymore. And so, but it's easy. That doesn't mean I don't tell myself like, oh, you used to be this and that, and now you don't do it. And oh my gosh, like, who are you even now?
Oh yeah, all the
I'll
all
do
the
that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I think I'd ask the dream to show me like what thread wants tending, like what part of my life wants my attention, because dreams are often knocking on the back door. They're kind of saying like, psst, like this is going okay, but psst, like what about this over here? Did just in case you weren't paying attention, we're going to show you this, you know.
I love that. And I think that answers the question that I had about if we're kind of starting a business, or we're in a business, or we're creating and we feel kind of quite fragmented and scattered. How do we
Mm.
know the difference between multitudinous and just all over the shop? But I think you've
Oh
kind
yeah.
of summed that up. Is there any other thoughts that you have on that?
Oh gosh, is that's hard.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can feel like you're pulling a lot of strings, and then suddenly you feel like you are the puppet of your own experience. I wish I don't
Yeah.
know how to do this. Um, I don't think that we are ever really meant to be living in a culture where we had to hold all the pieces. And yet I've never really vocalized this, but I'm thinking of it now as an entrepreneur who's also does oracular work and teaches dreams. Like we're never supposed to have all the skills. Like I shouldn't have to know how to build a website in order to be able to teach. And I could hire someone out too, but finances don't always allow for that for me. But I think that that's we're in a moment where we are breaking away. So people who are forming their own livelihoods, the teachers, classes, writing on Substack, your podcast, it's a breaking away from the norm. And I think we're still learning what is the structure that can
Yeah.
actually sustain this and hold me, because
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between being multi-passionate and having your hands in many pots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Letting that start to run the show to the sentence doesn't really work, but my point being, we can get to a place where we stop knowing how to take care of ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that doesn't actually have a lot to do with our abilities, or I think that that's a relationship to capitalism that we're dealing with,
Mm.
not really about who we are in our work.
Yes. I feel so excited by your words, and I know that we are in the, and as someone very very new to kind of all of this in as regards building a business and whatnot, I know that we're in perhaps a very liminal space, but I do see just more and more. I speak to women, I hear women, I read a lot, and I see more and more that we're just wanting to create on our own terms and create in our own way, and to kind of feel what is good for me, rather
Yeah.
than what is someone else telling me that I should be doing and when, and I feel very excited about that.
Me too. Me too.
um,
Creative energy is everything when it comes to our work and our business. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, what was that? What was that? What is everything?
Creativity.
Create. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what drives what I do more than anything
Yes.
else. It's,
Yeah.
that and like my own inner, what calling, vocation, vocare, what I'm drawn to. But yeah, creativity.
Yeah.
It's
Following the nudges of the heart for sure. And something else I see just in a monumental way, and I think it's perhaps because we're shining floodlights on it in more and more, but I just see so many women who are, and speak to a lot of women, not just women, men as well, but I think it's a lot more women who are terrified of visibility and being seen, and it's certainly, I'm certainly on my own journey with that. What would you say has, in your experience, silenced the feminine voice most? Do you think it's fear and conditioning, or is it more of a loss of relationship and dialogue, as we were speaking about before, with nature and the living world?
You have the best questions. They're questions that need like days for me to think on. I love that. They have a lot to them. Um, hmm. Well, so it's never going to be one answer. Um,
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to years, 3,000, 5,000-ish years of patriarchy. I'm thinking about,
Mm.
and when I say that, let me just say to everyone that that doesn't mean, when I think about patriarchy and its effect on women in a negative way, the negative effects of patriarchy, that doesn't mean the negative effects of men, because we have to remember that patriarchy is a system that puts a particular type of person uh, at the very top of a pyramid, and everyone else falls beneath that. And when we, and that, so that includes all different aspects of masculinity. Not so we look at like, I think patriarchy is very damaging to men too. So that being
Yes.
said,
Yeah.
when we look
Totally get that.
prior to, we see these circle-like structures that were matriarchy. So we're not now putting a woman at the top. We're looking at a circle, and at the center is the younger generation, just like the bees. So the bees live in a round structure. In the center of that structure is the brood. It's the gestating young. It's the babies. And once the babies hatch, they become young nurse bees. So the youngest bees are in the center, and they are the priority because they are what continues the whole. That's what we see in matriarchal or egalitarian cultures in the distant past. So when I think about your question, I think about how these women who used to have spiritual authority. So if you want to read more about this, learn more about this, I I really like the book by Max Dashu called Witches and Pagans. That goes into women's spiritual roles in Northern Europe mostly. Of course, that's only one part of the world, but because um, Western Europe and, well, Greek and Roman, and then eventually Western Europe created sort of the dominant narrative for the world through Christocentrism, you have this lens into what happened to women's roles and as spiritual, in spiritual, with spiritual power, not power over, but power. In fact, there's all sorts of things that we're finding, like, oh, this archaeological dig, it turns out it wasn't a warrior man. It's a woman. We just didn't think to check. Oh, this chief was actually not a chief, male chief, it was a female chief. We just didn't think to check because, women held many, many places of power and authority. And I think what's happening now is that women who are wanting to be sovereign in their work, in their creative expression, and in how they give that back to the community, whether that's through their art or through their writing or through teaching classes or through helping people develop their own businesses. I think that's this breaking down of the conditioning. So saying, oh, something in me very old remembers that it wasn't always this way. In fact, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, it wasn't this way, where I was somehow lesser. And so I've got to find a model. I got to create a different model, because this one over here, where I have to stay, behind the white picket fence, so to speak, isn't
Yeah,
working.
yeah. Um,
And we have come to a point where we now have the freedom to create these kinds of businesses, but we still have 3 to 5 thousand years of a patriarchal narrative that tells us we are less, and that it was very, very systematic. So many words associated with our power, our spiritual authority, our sovereignty were taken from us and turned into bad words. You can see it again and again in linguistics. The word witch came from the word to bend, to shape, to bend. So it's the same root word as wicker, which we shape and bend into baskets. The word enchantress came from enchantrix, which came from to chant or to sing. So the singers and the chanters who sang the sacred songs became something that couldn't be trusted, an enchantress, which is both interesting and mystical, but also not so safe. So we have
mm.
all of these different ways that we've shifted language around what's okay, to what we're allowed to be. And I think women are really reclaiming their own inner authority and sovereignty. And that comes
Mm.
with also spiritual authority and sovereignty. But we don't have a roadmap. So,
Yeah, yes. What a good point. I loved that you touched on the patriarchy there, and what it doesn't mean. And I read a great quote by Chris Sexton, I think, on Instagram the other day. Well, I think it was him. He said,
mm,
not patriarchy, not matriarchy, alchemy. And I thought that
mm,
was a great way of, because we all have the feminine and the masculine in all of us. And I thought that was a great way of putting it, that it's not about kind of thumbs down to men by any means. I sense that on a global scale right now, women are feeling triggered in ways that are perhaps beyond anything we've ever experienced, with the files. And I
mm.
think of the women in Iran and the women in Afghanistan. I think of the people in and the oppression in under the occupation in Minnesota and Minneapolis right now. And so there's so much, and I think it can trigger up so much. Our own experiences of oppression and sexual abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting, and all of that. How do you, from an animist perspective, particularly, I would be really interested to know, how do we stay in relationship to reality, to keep our voice with a fierce love for our fellow human and planet, without collapsing under the weight of it? And I've lost my balance many times on this in January, for sure.
Yeah, it's a big question again. What what is happening is very intentional, in terms of, for instance, in the United States, the way the files are being released, all of that is
Mm.
very intentional. And part of the intention is to create a collective overwhelm, which can turn into apathy. And that is where control happens, right? Control,
Mm.
apathetic culture, so numbed out. So interestingly, women are having this really incredible waking up to their power that I've been seeing throughout my lifetime. And then at the same time, with that, from a way zoomed out perspective, we're seeing what's always been there getting flushed to the surface. So this
Mm.
is not new. What's happening with Epstein is not new. What's happening with in Iran is not new. In terms of the US corruption that's happening, that's very much like people are very aware of it in the global stage. It's horrifying. It's like it's hard to even speak about, like find the right words for, but it's not new. It's been there the whole time. You
Mm.
just talk to any person of color. This is not new. Talk to women. This is not new. But what's happening is it's being shown.
Mm.
It's brazenly being shown, actually. And I have hope that that could be a somebody posted it. I think Liz, what's her, oh gosh, what is her name? Oh, feminist fabulous or something like that on Instagram. But she talked about this is the last tantrum of the final tantrum of the patriarchy, which I kind of like, I hope so. I hope that's what this is.
Yeah.
But in terms of not becoming, not falling into numbness and apathy, I do think holy rage is appropriate. I know that that's not the animist answer, so to speak, but like yeah, okay, let's talk about it from an animist perspective. When we talk about nature and wanting to feel connected with nature, it's often in this very, like, we conjure up images of things like waterfalls and fields and flowers and butterflies, and we often think of peace. And nothing about nature is wholly one thing. So it's definitely not just peaceful. And there is a time for earthquakes and lightning and, uh, you know, the raging seas, et cetera, et cetera. Just the other night, I had a dream where I was literally in a simulation where I was learning how to swim in raging seas, and they just kept turning it up a notch and be like, how is it now? And I was in control. I was like, I've got this. I know how to do this. But we have to be able to have outlets for that rage, even if that's, dancing or I took my daughter on a hike, and we were way out in this coastal region, and she was mad at the puddles, and she's 5 and she didn't want to deal with the puddles. And so we're like, well, you're getting muddy. That's true. That's happening. We're getting wet and muddy. But if you could complain, that's, yeah, okay. Or you could scream at the puddles if nobody else was around. And she just let out these little 5-year-old girl rage screams at the puddles. And like, that is what we need to be doing,
Mm.
because uh, we can't come to that peaceful place if we aren't allowed to have the full range of emotions. Now, I don't mean rage in terms of rage into violence, but like, you know, there's a
Yeah.
Sekhmet for a reason. There's a Kali for a reason. They aren't singular. Sekhmet is also Hathor. Hathor is pleasure and dancing. This Egyptian goddess, right? Milk and honey and flow and beauty. Sekhmet, her other side, is rage. And fire and lion. I know that's not a nice answer. But I that's where I'm personally just moving through a lot of rage right now. Very triggered. I'm very um I'm very much confronting. So I'm 2 years out of a sexual assault, and I have no patience right now. And I think that I have infinite patience for my daughter. I have infinite patience for community and how we're coming together. But for this kind of behavior being allowed, I have no patience. And
Mm.
maybe that doesn't make me the pinnacle of spiritual serenity, but I don't want to be that right now,
Yeah.
you know?
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Righteous rage is mm, pure, primordial rage that needs to come out in fierce love for one another, as opposed to reacting with like, kind of a thing.
And then
Um,
the other side of that is the humor. So with rage comes the grief and the humor. But if we're just in grief, we become frozen after a while. So we have
yeah,
to have like the good laugh. What's the story?
yeah.
The Mysteries of Eleusis, real quick. The story of Demeter was that her daughter had been taken by Hades into the underworld. She was in despair and grief and rage, and nothing could pull her out of it for a long time, until the goddess of laughter came and told really raunchy body jokes. And we were finally laughed. And that, like there's even a festival, like in the Eleusinian Mysteries in ancient Greece, they had a night where all the women would get together before going into the final deep mysteries of life and death. Woo! They had a night where the women got together and they just roasted each other all night long. You know?
Oh, I want to go to that party.
Yeah, they were just body and raunchy and all. Like we need to keep the humor going, and
Yeah.
that is also, like it seems so taboo against it with everything going on, but I've actually been pretty amazed at part of the resistance being humor. And
Yes. Yes. The people, I look at the people in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it blows my mind the resistance they've put up with, like, kind of, I've seen the singing choir, the resistance choirs, they're singing. There's been so many elements that they've fought with, as you say, with joy, with love, with peace, and that's not easy when they're being met with such harsh, not just even the winter. I just think of even the winter conditions,
yeah.
but also the harshness of what they've been living on a day-to-day level. I'm
Mhm.
so aware of your time, but there was just a couple of questions I wanted to ask about you as a teacher. How do you keep a relational kind of conversation with your students, and yet also showing leadership and authority in what really is a very unique pathway that you're forging? How do you overcome that? Because I just see that, again, so many of us women struggle with leadership, in the leadership realm.
I, uh, goodness me. It might help that I'm a Leo rising. Um,
Right. Right.
it might also help. Yeah.
What am I? I am Leo in my. It's not my moon. It's not my sun. What's the other one?
Right.
Is it rising? Oh
Yeah.
yes, me
Yeah.
too.
So
Then,
our
yeah.
rising is what we are moving into, and Leo is
Yes.
expressive.
Right.
I grew up with a lot of music in my life. I was performing at a very young age. By like 9, I was in a little band, and I got used to being in front of people really early in my life, and spent years as a performing musician. So being in front of people doesn't scare me, and that really helped because it meant that I could really focus on what I was teaching as opposed to any kind of stage fright. So I'm just going to say
Right.
that, like, I had a lot of practice in that way. But I think it's that uh, I'm so curious about their experiences as well. I think I really see it as not me as the authority, but me as like, hi, I'm a big sister a few steps down the road. And on that journey, I found out a few more things, and I'm reaching my hand back and bringing you along. And
Yeah.
that mentality that I hold inside myself, I am literally a big sister, which probably helps as well, but that mentality, it helps me feel like I'm not alone in it, because it can be quite lonely if you go into this place of being the authority without companionship. That can be quite lonely. But to being someone who's like, hey, look what I figured out on the journey. You're also on this journey. Let's see what you figure out as you're coming down the road with me, because
Mm.
people are having experiences that I've never had that I'm learning from just as much. And yeah, I've like gone and gotten the master beekeeping, for instance, degree from Cornell, or not degree, but certificate. Like that helps give me more confidence in the things I already know. It helps widen my range. But
Mm.
I think really if I can think of it more of a let's sit in a circle and have a chat, as opposed to I have to perform my authority here. then I'm doing,
Yeah.
I feel
Uh,
better. It's just, it's
yeah.
a way I see it more than how I do. Yeah.
A beautiful answer that we are all like, what's the phrase? We're student, teacher, and expert all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to oh, we're on time. Have you got time for just a couple of
I'm
more
I'm fine.
questions?
I'm fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
please tell me to bugger off now,
No,
Susie.
no, I don't have anything scheduled. The next
This
thing I
is
have to do is go edit my website. So this is lovely.
okay, but I'm not going to keep you for much longer. But I would love to know what I saw one of your Instagram posts that really sunk to my heart, because what is the difference between um inherited habit and inherited wisdom? I'm thinking particularly of an Instagram post where, by just a certain tweak with your hives, you saved the lives of bees, but that had never really been questioned before. It was just, we close the lid like this and there's lives lost, kind of a thing. And so sometimes we struggle to trust our inner knowing, our inner authority, and to question what's normal. How do you kind of traverse that challenge? What helps you stay with your inner authority?
Few things. Immense curiosity. I think whenever we feel off kilter, if we can turn towards curiosity, I'm really trying to teach that to my daughter, in terms of social emotional learning, to be curious about someone's experience, curious why. So with the bees, for instance, curious about, well, how do the bees communicate? Like, I know how I can be with them, but how do they actually communicate in the hive? And a lot of people are going to jump to things like, oh, well, they communicate through pheromones, or they communicate, but not a lot of people are going to tell you, well, actually, when they're moving around the hive, they're constantly bumping into each other. They have an exoskeleton, and so they're bumping into each other, and that's how they are able to navigate with each other around the hive. So if I can emulate that, even with my hands a little bit, it will get them to go back down into the hive, and then I can put the lid on without crushing a bunch of bees. Or if I can lower the lid in this sort of gentle bouncing way, there, that bumping bouncing is going to change how they react, because I'm not trying to force my will upon them. I'm trying to, I mean, I am, because I'm closing a lid on a hive, but I'm saying, well, where can I meet you? That's what I'm curious about. Where can I meet you? So curiosity, where can I meet this situation? Where can I meet this person? Definitely could be used in our current political climate. And
Hmm.
then the other one is body. I'm all about the body. I was really blessed to be part of um, a series of workshops where we focused a lot on how intuition and knowing and everything moves through the body, and in different ways that we can actually come into contact with the wisdom of our body and what it wants to say. Very somatic, dreaming with the body, everything with the body. And so this happened to me right at the time that I had had the miscarriage, where I was very dissociated and I wanted to find a way back into my body and I couldn't figure it out. And so over a decade of working with really big embodiment practices, I've learned to listen to the body. So if I'm not sure, do I go in the hive or not? I can usually find a yes or a no if I just take a moment to
Hmm.
breathe and settle. I'll literally do what I'm doing. I'll put my hands on my body, maybe my solar plexus and my belly or my heart, and just feel, is it a yes or a no? I've made choices about even like social gatherings. Like, is this like, I don't really want to go, but let me feel. And if I feel like yes, maybe that's some intuition coming through. Even if I'm like, oh, or if I'm really
Hmm.
excited, but my body is like, hey, wait a second. Our body has so much to say. So that's,
Hmm.
yeah,
So much wisdom in the body, and taking the time, doesn't it show more than ever the need to just take a breath with ourselves, you know?
absolutely. And we don't know how. We've forgotten how. So,
Mm.
culturally, so we're having to remember that the body has a lot more information than we.
Mm.
Yeah.
Final question. Is there anything in particular that the bees are teaching you right now? about the time, the rather tumultuous times that we're living through.
Mm. In ancient, not ancient, in like the 16, 17, 1800s, still to present day, there was a really common practice called telling the bees, where you had to tell the bees what was going on. If there's a marriage,
Right.
death, or you'd knock on the hive and you'd let them know. And one of the things that often gets missed is that you also had to tell them about social unrest, keep them informed. Uh, so I am thinking about that, um, like maybe I should be telling them about what's going on right now in the world, keep them informed. But what are they teaching me right now? So many things. Let's see here. What wants to come through? I think the things that my lens with the bees used to be very bee centric. It used to be very much with the actual hive. And what they've started to do in the last few years, and maybe it's partly because of becoming a mother, but my view of them has really expanded into the landscape. What is the land doing? What are the flowers doing? What is the climate doing? And they're expanding. It's like feeling like my peripheral vision. And I think that there's no accident that that's happened at a time when we really need that in terms of our collective awareness, this quality of how dependent they are. It's very clear how dependent they are on the watershed, on the flora and fauna, not fauna, but the flora. Um, so I've been really feeling that sense of interconnectedness and not just a hive, but the other hives in the region and how those hives are all part of a invisible weave that we can't even see, but they're very conscious of each other. They know about each other. They're aware of the other beehives in the region. There's it's actually the males that do that. The males go
Mm.
out. They don't have stingers, but the males go out and they visit other hives because they don't have stingers. They aren't a threat. So they're allowed to go into other hives and bring back information about the well-being of the
Mm.
ecosystem of bees in the region. And that's part of this deeper tending to the nervous system. So I've been really kind of asking questions around learning from them about how to be in the world in a time of um, a lot of flux.
Mm.
Uh, and a lot of them die. A lot of them die,
Mm.
but they never seem to communicate a state of absolute distress. They seem to just, I'm here, okay, we're going into the other side and we'll be back. It's there's a degree of when I say that sounds like I'm not being very responsible with the bees, and it's not that. It's that they've really changed my view of death.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, Ariella, such a pleasure. I can't express enough what a pleasure it is to talk to you. I'll put your links in the notes, your
Sure.
Instagram page. I can't recommend enough for people to sign up to your newsletter. I was just saying earlier that I have hundreds, I've signed up to so many things over the years. There's only literally about a handful of people whose newsletter I open immediately as soon as it pops up, and yours is one of them. Your 12 days of dreaming through Yule. I did every single one. They were just, I love your newsletter. When are you going to start a witch school, Ariella?
Oh, gosh, that's a great idea. I don't know. Not a
Oh, God,
plan.
please do
Yeah.
so.
Did you ask me this the other day? Because I swear to God, somebody else asked me that just recently.
It wasn't
It's,
me, but oh, maybe I did in an email. But yeah,
no,
definitely it's needed.
that is funny. A witch school. There's lots. I'm definitely in a reassessment moment, but at the moment, I am dedicated to writing. I'm working on a on a book. And so
Oh,
that's what my energy
fantastic.
is. And so maybe after that.
Fantastic. And is there anything else that you would like to direct people to as regards your work?
Mm.
Any
Oh
upcoming
gosh.
courses or events?
Just come hang out. There's right now, Dreamer Sanctum is enrolling if you want to do a long form program, but otherwise, come check it out. There's some, different resources on my website and that sort of thing. There's nothing in particular at the moment other than, sign up for the newsletter. That's always helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is always magical,
Get
always.
us off of our dependence on Instagram. So
Yes, yes, the doom scrolling. Thank you so much. Bless you, Ariella. Really bless you. Thank you for your time.
the thoughtfulness of all your questions, they really got me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah.